Welcome to another episode of Advertising Alpha. We got Kevin Lindberg here, who's the head of partnerships at Proxima. It's a data intelligence platform that scales paid media spend efficiently for consumer brands using AI targeting insights. Kevin joined Proxima in the summer of 2024 and to build this agency partner program centered around performance marketers specializing in e-commerce growth strategies, just like Hstreet. So it's a great partnership. Kevin brings 7 years of e-commerce agency partnerships and strategic alliance experience to the podcast, and his work with ISV, a digital marketing product and corporate partners, has helped thousands of brands optimize their technology stacks and revenue streams. So, Kevin, super pumped to have you here. And I think too, one thing to just note, the reason why we called it Advertising Alpha is we're using the finance term here, which is like alpha is just, some strategy or insight or tactic that you're using to kind of beat the market. And so I think Proxima is a great example here where the average person, average performance advertiser is using, like, let's say on Meta specifically, they're using broad targeting, right? Because everyone's like, broad is all that matters. You don't need to use lookalikes anymore. You don't need to do this kind of interest stack targeting. Just go broad, let Meta figure it out. And Proxima is very different where it allows you to target custom audiences, target very specialized lookalike audiences. So I guess really the first question for you here is, how is Proxima better than Meta broad targeting?
For sure. So just to take one first step back, I think it's super important to kind of understand what we're bringing to the table and then how that actually is implemented within a platform such as Meta or TikTok and provides huge advantage for our end customers, which is at the end of the day, the D2C brands we want to empower. As you mentioned at the top, we're a data intelligence platform, but really what's unique about Proxima is that we sit on top of a enormous aggregated first-party data set. So we have 12,000 connected brand storefronts. We have 80 million plus unique shopper personas that are within this database. And we can actually see within this D2C ecosystem what people are doing. What are they actually purchasing down to the SKU level, the size, the color, how much are they spending and how frequently they are spending. So when you think about how can we complement or enhance the performance that is happening on Meta? Their algorithms and their models are continuing to get better and better, but there are always going to be limitations to any type of platform. They can only see and act upon what they have access to. They don't have that access to the deep storefront and first-party data information. They can see different types of engagement. They can see different interests. They can even see some conversions that you are going through as a shopper prompted by advertising that's passed there. But at the end of the day, their model is going to have a particular ceiling or reach limitation based off of what they do know and what they're being fed by the brand. If you're able to provide additional first-party data like Proxima is, which is tailored to each potential brand or each brand that we're working with, it allows them to reach a little bit further. It allows to extend the value of some of their best hero creatives, some of their best evergreen campaigns, everything that they're doing. It allows you to get further with it. And most importantly, target the most high likelihood purchasers that are high fit for that brand. So at the end of the day, we aren't going to try to stand on the soapbox and say that we're always better than broad and ASC, because it is so important to run a lot of business as usual functions through there. But ultimately, people hit glass ceilings. They need to find additional efficiencies. They're struggling within the platform limitations. And what we're coming in and doing is tailoring audiences specifically to the business case and the business needs and allow them to access new customers and new audiences at an efficient rate.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there are two things I kind of see with this. One is with broad targeting. So effectively, Meta has determined some audience that it believes are going to be the highest potential converters, right? These are the people who are going to make a purchase. And I've seen this time and time again where you're targeting this broad audience. It might be like, let's say 20 million people or 50 million people in terms of the audience size and the ad set. But then you look at the account and let's say you've been running for a couple months. The frequency against that audience that you're actually delivering ads to might be like a 6 or an 8. And so it's interesting because even though you have this massive kind of audience group, that's like set up within your ad set, Meta has determined that there's a smaller subsection that is likely to convert. So they're only delivering ads against that. And I think a case for Proxima is it basically jumpstart Meta and it's like, hey, well, stop like kind of focusing on this one group that you determined is ideal and then go look at these other people here, right? And go deliver ads against them. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, so there's actually, you and I haven't even had the time just because this is brand new over the last week and a half. But on that point, we've released a new solution that is our audiences coupled with a filtering CAPI solution that, again, actually helps mitigate the problem that you're expressing right now, which is, hey, you have all this first party data that you're feeding into the model from your website as a brand or as an agency helping to facilitate that. The platform is also using all of their data, engagement, and information, all the signals that they get to be able to go out and say, hey, we're going to take this enormous group. We're going to filter it down to what we think are the best auctions, the best audience, the best places for your brand to be. And we're going to try to be as efficient as possible there. But there isn't a really sophisticated trimming process that's happening in that filtering. They're just, who is the most likely? Are you most likely to win this auction? We think those people are actually going to purchase by getting that ad in front of them. That's the route that it's going. Essentially, with what we're doing now on our audiences, number one is taking out, hey, who are the people that are high customer lifetime value, high AOV? What's that fingerprint look like? How can we take a lookalike seed audience of your folks, like your customers that currently aren't in your data set? So we're enriching the model, number one, through that way. And then number two, through the filtering CAPI that we're now leveraging as well, we're taking those events that you're triggering from your website and we're actually focusing in on what are the most valuable events that are going to lead you towards a transaction. So to your point, like we're actually really focusing on the skill set and ability that their model has and getting it even more refined with clear signals and clear targeting that you're going very efficiently at a tighter group that's going to be just more economic at the end of the day for the brand. So yeah, it's a very interesting thing where like, it's go broad, ASC. Obviously you have to find your hero and winners essentially across creative and find what's going to tap into certain components. But then you really want to steer the direction of the brand and steer the direction of your advertising towards the people that are going to mean the most for the brand. And that's where we really step in.
Awesome. The other big opportunity I see is if you're doing a brand new, it's a new brand and you're launching for the first time, or it's a new product launch. I've seen this a number of times, especially with like, net new brands, right? Someone that's really just launching for the first time, digital advertising, specifically Meta. Hard to trust that, with broad targeting and the creative that you have, that you are hitting those right people and Meta is effectively learning. But I also see the opportunity with Proxima with this, 80 million person data set you have across all these different stores that you can create the right segment of likely purchasers based on a purchase activity that's very similar brands, and then create that as your seed audience that you can target at the very beginning. It's a much more efficient way to find those ideal customers instead of just trusting Meta to figure it out with broad targeting over a much longer period of time.
Yeah, you're 100% right. We see that consistently across our client base where there may be a new category that they're launching into. It's a new product. Of course, they have certain pieces of data and information that, give them the right idea of who they want to target for that. They develop the product or the category for a reason, usually, right? There's some sort of void that they're trying to fill. But like you said, going into the standard tracks on Meta, you're really hoping that you're encapsulating the value of that product, who it should go to, and creative that's going to allow the model to figure it out on behalf of the brand. And that's a lot of trust to implement. And of course, Meta wouldn't be as successful at what they do unless they were pretty darn good at it. So like, there's definitely no discouragement on leveraging those traditional channels. But like you said, in order to get those transactions and the model to operate the way that you want it, infusing it with more signals, more targeting, more information that would take that like time for them to learn, we can implement that earlier on by going out in our database and finding those people proactively for you and implementing, like you said, those seed audiences in there for that specific product, for that specific use case or business goal or category that's being launched. it definitely is a way to jumpstart it, because you are giving it the right direction instead of, hey, go out and boil the ocean for me. And they'll have some degree of success for it, but why not shorten that learning period if you have the ability to do so?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And I've seen this a number of times. We've done some new product launches as well as, first year of Hstreet, we worked with a lot of startup e-com brands. And while we ultimately found success over a long period of time, let's say like 6 months, those are brutal 6 months of the brand really being frustrated with us until we could get Meta to learn who to deliver ads to. But you can just jumpstart that entirely by just working with someone like Proxima. It's so much easier and so much less headache.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun when we see these scenarios, like we have our inputs to produce outputs, right? So our machine learning is taking in information from the customer base, or if there is a new launch, they'll give us some leading indicators of like who they're trying to reach. And basically we pull in all this data and information, and we're crunching it, and we're really trying to understand what is the fingerprint that we need to then look for within our shopper universe, that 80 million personas. And a lot of times we'll show brands that, like, hey, you may be in this particular vertical or in this category, but there's actually a huge correlation between your customer base and your vertical, and some obscure vertical that you would have never thought of before for whatever reason, because of maybe the makeup of, hey, it's the gender, the household income, the recency of their purchases. There are all these indicators that are allowing us to know, hey, this is actually an interesting group that you should go out and target. We feel confident about it. We should test it. We're able to pull that in. And it's a really big, like, eye-opening experience for a lot of our brands, because otherwise they would have never known to go after that. And we're helping them basically jumpstart that progress from an early stage, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that kind of leads into my next question, but maybe there's a couple ways of talking about this, but can you just explain the value of the first party data that you've collected? And then two, maybe on top of that, contextualize that with like, what is first party data versus third party data? And then two, maybe you want to kind of elaborate on like this fingerprint you described or signal, because I think, well, I'll let you answer the question, but I guess one thing that I've seen consistently throughout doing this for basically now it's 10 years, people come with this very strong opinion about, a lot of times it's just demographic data about who their customers are. So they're like, oh, it's a suburban mom, she drives a minivan, she gets Sweetgreen once a week, and but also too, like, buys these things for her kids. And it's like you have this very kind of qualitative description of your target audience. However, I found the most important thing to determine the likelihood of someone buying a product is just past purchase history. And so how do you kind of leverage first party data to do that? Like, what does that really mean? And then what is that compared to like third party data, and what most people kind of like leverage through like pixels or through, like interest based targeting, things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think you just nailed something that's super important, and really the differentiator of what we're bringing to the market versus other third-party data solutions that may be in the market, or any other audience producer out there, is recent behavior is going to be the best indicator for immediate behavior in the future as well. So like basically what we're looking for is not only folks that are matching at a top line what you're looking for. Again, those are like some of the basic principles, like an Experian data profile or something like that, where you're getting gender, household income, maybe education level, basic pieces of information at a high level. That's definitely a good starting point. But what's really more important to know after that is, who are they? What are they purchasing? How much are they purchasing? And how frequently? So if you have basically that detailed information and ecosystem of not only what is the general profile you're looking for, but who are the folks that are actively participating in the marketplace as well, those are going to be the highest probability plays for a brand. So that is the true difference between us and others, and really thinking about first party and third party. So on the first party side, we have this aggregated first party data set where we can see the depth and breadth of all of that information. If you're getting additional, guiding audiences from a third party that are going to be more generic, meaning, hey, we're looking for men who shop for apparel and, we have some credit card data associated with them. That really, really large group of people is not going to be as effective because they may not be, if you're a fitness brand, they may not be people that are also interested in, athleisure and protein and all of the items that are highly correlated and demonstrating leading indicators that they would be likely to purchase from your brand. So essentially that's what we're focused on and really passionate about, is building out this data set, allowing people to get access to first party data that they otherwise wouldn't have access to, and not try to reach out to an entire group that may not be a great fit for them. So that's the big kind of guiding light that we try to follow. But ultimately, yeah, it's all about actually having that data yourself and being able to leverage it versus relying on others and pulling in bits and pieces to hope for the best.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, maybe you can explain how, what, and I mean, I'm not a data scientist. I can't really speak to it that well, but what signal truly means in data, especially when you're trying to identify someone's likelihood to make a purchase. Because I think you have all these kind of characteristics or qualities that you can kind of pull on an audience group. You're kind of talking to, it's hey, these men who might be into some type of fitness, whatever it might be. You can create all these kind of qualitative descriptions of this ideal customer, but then ultimately to buy your specific product, the only thing that matters is signal, which is purchase history and their likelihood to buy it, because there might be cuts of that broad audience group where it's they're just never going to buy that product. And the only way to know for sure is if they bought similar products. And so that is the only thing that matters, right? That's true signal.
Yeah, totally. So one way that I've heard it described internally, which I think is really helpful, is this. Imagine you're scrolling through your Instagram feed. Someone sends you a direct message of a cute cat video, and you're engaging with that cat video because you start consuming some of that content. You're ultimately put into an interest group around cats and therefore may receive a food advertisement in the near future because you're showing what in platform seem to be very strong leading indicators of, hey, this is a person that probably would be interested in this particular product. We're going to serve them that ad because of that engagement, because of that interest that they have. I don't have a cat. I have a dog, right? So that eliminates me as a potential buyer right away. And to your point, we really want to focus on the people that are actually purchasing for those specific things. So when you're able to actually go into a data pool and pull out who, based off of all of this information that we have in this ecosystem, this aggregated first party data set, who do we know is a dog owner who has purchased a relevant product around dogs recently and then produce off of that? When you're able to provide that type of signal of, hey, this is a person that we can very clearly see is very, very interested in buying from you because they've demonstrated this past purchase behavior, even if it's not on your storefront, that's really interesting. That's where we create the signal and create those seed audiences to then guide the model and guide your campaigns in the right direction. So I really like that example because it hits home to me because it's very true. I have seen that happen to my own algorithm before, and I am a dog owner and I'm definitely not a cat owner. And that is exactly what has happened before.
Yeah, no, 100%. Awesome. So I guess, that kind of was part of my third question, but maybe I'll ask a different one here. But I think this is great for you to speak to because we've actually had some issues with Proxima, and the issues have been, I think, based on its user error. It's our media buyers have not trusted the process enough with Proxima. So I was wondering too, if you can kind of explain for anyone that was interested in using it, how to trust the process around testing these audience in Proxima, and then also too, how to set the right expectations on doing this test. So how much budget, how long should they be testing things without touching these campaigns? Because this is really important. And a lot of people screw this up where, everything, it all takes time to learn. Even with Proxima might jumpstart some things. You have to sit there and just let it learn. And I think, the issues we've had with media buyers is they don't see great performance after a couple of days. So they want to make adjustments or they want to shut it down. And that's not how it works. Like you need to collect enough data so you can actually have statistically significant results so you can make very good definitive decisions, right? So can you explain what the expectations are on Proxima, how long it needs to run for, how much budget, and then how that's kind of set up too by your customer acquisition costs and how you can kind of use that to frame how much budget you need to use, et cetera?
For sure. And right, the hardest thing to do is sometimes nothing at all. We work in a very high paced, high pressure environment. So it's a very natural inclination when testing to abort that test prior to when it really should be running for. So like the guidance that we always give on this, and first and foremost, we offer a 30-day free trial for all brands for exactly this reason. We want it to be a proof of concept. We understand that there is a level of trust that you must have in order to allocate any portion of your test budget over to audiences and prospects. So we have full appreciation for that. And that's why we do a lot, 30 days with no software, no service fee or anything along those lines. It's just an allocated test budget to allow us to test audiences, find the winners, scale, and continue to optimize over that 1 month period. So in regards to like how much should you allocate for testing, we always recommend to start with testing around 10 times CPA. That's going to give enough conversions to our model to be learning and iterating from there so that we can find winners first and foremost. And then secondarily from there, we can actually scale up because we're repeating success through this particular audience as we refresh it over time as well. So that's generally the guiding post to start. What we usually see our brands do is allocate anywhere between, I would say about 10% of their overall monthly meta budget to Proxima to start the test. It's about 10% to start. And ideally, we want to see the success and the efficiencies show themselves over the first 3 weeks. And by the end of that 30-day free trial, ideally be making up anywhere between 15 and 30% of the overall meta monthly spend. That's really kind of what that growth arc looks like, utilizing Proxima audiences. And like you said, it does take some patience. We expect when we start, usually for our test, to drop 5 audiences into an account. We're fully expecting numerous of those audiences to not work, but those failures and those interesting success stories, even within the audiences that aren't ripping the cover off the ball, help teach everything else that we are going to do on the product side and also for our team on the optimization side alongside Hstreet. So when you implement the audiences and you first run them, you don't want to touch anything for the first 5 to 7 days. Just let it maturize, let it learn. Let's collect some transactions. Let's see where the actual footing is held on those first set of audiences. After that first week, we then are going to know, hey, these 3, not so good. Those are laggers. Let's pull them out. This particular top performing one is great. Let's throttle that a bit further. Let's also add in these other 2 audiences because we saw that the transactions taught us something new about the new customer profiles that we're acquiring. Great. Now let's pull in this brand similarity audience. Let's pull in this additional lookalike audience from here. We push that into the account. We continue to run it, and then we can trim again. And we're always optimizing throughout that process. So that's the way that we approach our 30-day test. And you really should be able to see the impact within those first 3 weeks. And then ultimately, that's where we start to identify the long-term scaling strategy with our agency partners and brands.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's like, I think there's an example where, so I used to work at this agency and this was pre-iOS 14. And we also used we kind of use a media buying software to do this, and we worked with a lot of bigger like Fortune 500 brands. But our kind of thing was when we went and engaged with the brand, started running their performance ads, we actually required they would have to give us $100K in spend, and we would spend that over 3 weeks and not touch anything, and we'd just let it ride. We had a very kind of elaborate framework for those initial campaigns we would launch with a bunch of different variables we're kind of looking for within it. But then after that first 100K spend in those 3 weeks, we had so much great data that was statistically significant to then, double down on. And then after, like, as long as the brand let us do that, we were always, performance got better and better every month because we're continually doubling down on these known combinations of things that worked well. But it was always like, it's kind of it's tough for brands to see that because like so much of those campaigns, like so many different combinations of things with whether it's creative or audiences or, for that, we were kind of optimizing across different placements as well. But so much of it looked really, really bad. And they're like, well, why don't you just shut it off? Like, why don't you just turn this off? And it's like, you just have to let it ride to collect the data and to know what actually is working. Because if you don't have statistically significant data on these winning parts, when you go and double down on it, it might not do better because you actually didn't truly know if it's going to work or not. And so that's the thing. You really do have to sit down and kind of wait and trust the process. Because if you don't collect enough data, whatever adjustments you might make could be just inaccurate. And then all of a sudden you have this like combination of things you think is working well just because, that kind of preliminary data you got back looked good. You go double down on it and it all falls apart, right? And so I think that's the thing. And we've had issues with that with our media buyers where they just can't trust the process and they want to jump in and start adjusting things. It's like, no, just let it ride.
Yeah, totally. And it's something we all work with on a daily basis as well, because you have to have appreciation that everyone's livelihood, for lack of a better description, is pending on the performance of the strategies that you deploy. And we have the utmost appreciation of that. And ultimately, to your point, what we always like to say is, it's inputs and outputs with what we're doing here, with the way that the world is going. And this is not just for Proxima, but for in general. Even before you and I jumped on today, we're talking about leveraging AI and some of the tools that we're using with our teams to make everyone more efficient. The more training and the more inputs that you provide these really powerful algorithms, these machine learning tools, you're going to get better output. And sometimes that does require some patience and a labor of love, where you need to have it acquire successes and a lot of failures. And therefore it can sniff out when it's on the right track or if it's not on the right track. So that's really, really important. And again, we set up our testing structure intentionally for that, because we need to give it time. We need to show value, incremental value, most specifically for our agency partners and the brands. And we can't do that unless we give it time to breathe and for it to learn and for it to self-iterate. And then our teams, meaning like Hstreet and our account managers working together to notice interesting trends that are happening within the account and in the ecosystem and apply those learnings to make sure that our brands are getting the best value from it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that was it for questions I have. I guess, before we hop off here, is there anything else you'd like to say, anything else about Proxima or any other points you want to talk about here?
No, I mean, first and foremost, we appreciate working with the Hstreet crew. It's been awesome to be able to launch many tests alongside you. And yeah, the main thing that we are looking to bring to the market is you always have to be testing. You always have to be finding that strategic edge. We understand that broad ASC, creative iteration, creative testing is so important. But if you are running into a glass ceiling, if you are running into efficiency problems and you're looking for an additional lever to pull, one that doesn't necessarily require a lot of labor, look for an Hstreet, look for a Proxima, individuals that know how to pull those growth levers that can be quick unlocks over a pretty tight period of time. So always be testing is definitely the way to think about it. And don't just think about always be testing on creative. Think about how you can get super prescriptive by reaching new audiences and ultimately unlocking new customers through different solutions like Proxima.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks for being here. And this is awesome. So really appreciate all these insights.
Thank you so much for having me.